Hey everyone, welcome to the Elite Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Poppell, along with my co-host, William McClellan. How you doing today, Will?
Dude, Wednesday, all is good. I love a good recording sesh. I'm excited.
Yeah, no, man, and it's definitely a fun one because we got a special guest today.
Yeah, let's introduce that guest. He helps every single week get guests on the show. He's amazing at introductions, hell of a businessman, runs multiple restaurants. Bring him in, Sam Poppell.
Hey man, appreciate you having me on today. Just can't wait to be here. Share my information with everybody about rental property.
Dude, this is going to be really cool because I am, as you know, and we've talked about, we come from different backgrounds. So like short-term rentals and things like that, I'm not super versed in, which is so great how we can complement each other, the good old yin and yang effect. But
right.
I'm really excited for all the listeners to get to know all of your knowledge and kick things off in everything rentals. So you ready to get it started?
Yeah, man. No, I mean, I definitely, thought whenever, we're having to, we had a guest reschedule today, what we could talk about. I was like, well, man, I'm turning over 2 long-term rentals right now. So it's Perfect. On the top of my mind because, I had a long time of, coasting, just collecting that mailbox checks, and now it was like everybody moving out at once, it's kind of, So it's a great time for me to, share the story, information about it, since like this is something anybody who wants to be a landlord has to deal with, and probably one of the bigger fears when it comes to having single family rentals, as far as like everybody moving out at once.
Yeah. So since it's top of mind, just tell the listeners a little bit about that and kind of what you're going through right this second, and then we'll kind of dive in a little deeper. Just because you're experiencing what everyone doesn't want to happen all at once,
Right. Well, funny enough, the 2 houses I'm currently turning over are kind of tenants that I've had issues with. One is a house that I manage for my family. I manage several single family homes for my parents, along with some apartments. And then I have my own set of single family homes as well. So in one of my parents' properties that I was managing, we've had this lady who pretty much has been nothing but a problem, since allowing her to move in. Yeah, everything was kind of good initially, and then it was just constant nagging about problems. And I send people to fix things right away, so that's not my issue. What made this person's difficult was that she'd tell me a problem, and so I'd be wanting to send someone over, but then she'd give me all these stipulations about, well, when my person can come there and be there, oh, she had to be there at this time, just making it difficult. And, life doesn't really work that way for anybody, like me as a homeowner in my own home. If I want to get something fixed, man, we're at the mercy of the repairman schedule,
right.
know? Like I can get to say like, hey, only come between 9 and 10. If I give that stipulation, I might not get a guy for 3 or 4 weeks, because that would be when that hour block is open. So I can't expect it. So it's like to have a tenant, put that kind of demand. It was crazy. So just really hard to work with. So when our lease was come up for renewal, we just decided not to renew that one. So I knew that one was coming. And then one of my other rentals, basically in the last 6 months, I had a person who started off as a great tenant, but then just started being late every month on rent, and they pay all the late fees. But it was like I wouldn't get anything until I put the 3-day notice on the door. In the state of Florida, we have and every state is different when it comes to long-term rentals, as far as how it works, as far as the steps to do an eviction and things like that. In Florida, it's relatively simple. That's one of the reasons I love investing in Florida. It's a very landlord-friendly state. And so in the state of Florida, when your long-term tenant doesn't pay, you then issue them a 3-day notice to pay or quit, which basically means they have 3 days to either pay you the rent or move out. And so in that time period, they can basically kind of just like, get up, move out, and kind of their way of, when it's not going to, they're not going to be able to pay, but they're also not going to try to stay. You're not going to have to take it any further. After that period, if they refuse to do either, then that's when you have to go file a formal eviction. Now,
so Sam, getting to that point,
right.
What are some pain points as a landlord that would make you go, put that note on? Obviously money, right? But what are some other things?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. I mean, my advice for everyone is like you just really got to be set up in your rules up front, and you need to explain it to your tenants so that way they know it's not personal and they don't get angry with you because you told them what would happen if if they went down this road. So whenever I have someone
how you set up some rules, like what if this is my first rental house, like
right. So if you were my new tenant, I would tell you day one, I'd be like, hey, Will, so according here to the lease, you must pay me on the first of every month. Rent is late if you pay me after the first. So after the first, you will then be hit with the late fees.
And what do you typically have late fees at? And what's something if I'm a newer investor that I should be looking for, or what's super, super crazy and what's kind of in scope?
Yeah, I mean, they vary a little bit. I think you have certain limitations with the state. I'm very aggressive with mine. I do mine at $25 a day until I hit the state max, which I believe is around 10% of the rent total. So basically, I write it in there where it's 25% to a max of this. And you usually try not to let it go that far.
Yeah.
And I definitely recommend that if you ever have a tenant, and the reason you tell your tenant, you want to tell them day one that, hey, look, when you're late, I'm gonna put this notice in the door. You want to do it right away because everybody has good intentions, but sometimes things don't work out. And I've had it kind of times where I've been nicer to people in the past where they're like, hey, I'm gonna get it to you, and then they don't get it to me. Well, now then it just drug things a little longer because that 3-day notice, it only applies to business days. Weekends and holidays don't count. So if you don't give them the notice right away, let's just say that it's the 5th of the month, and you call them up, you inform them that, hey, I have not received rent. You currently owe me this plus the late fees for a total of this. If you do not bring it by today, by the end of the day today, tomorrow morning, I will be issuing you the 3-day notice to pay or quit. If what you should do is follow through exactly what you said and go put that notice on the door.
So what does that notice kind of look like? And if I've never done anything like this,
it's very simple. You can basically Google it and find it for your state. So in state of Florida, if you just Google Florida 3-day notice, pay or quit PDF, add that PDF in the Google search, you'll get a few options to print one off. But like I said, whenever you want to issue that right away, so that way you then can go straight for the eviction if you need to. If you want to show any grace, show it after the 3-day notice, because at least then you put your formal notice in, so that way you can then follow through with an eviction. Most of the time, in my experience, so far in my life as a landlord, and I've been a landlord now for 7 years, I have not had to do a formal eviction. Everybody that I've ever come close to has always moved out on the deadline. I've had, I would say, a total of 4 tenants that would have been more that I would have considered, not fun to be their landlord, kind of problem tenants. And all 4 of those times, all 4 of those times, like I said, the one of them was this lady that I just told her I wasn't renewing her lease, and she left on the day. So no real problem there. Now, like I said, when people are leaving and they don't want to leave, don't expect to get your place back perfect. Like the lady who I didn't renew her lease, she left me a big note in Sharpie on the fridge. So of course that fridge is no longer usable. Of course, we do have a.
So she left a note on the fridge minus the sticky note.
Yeah, no, right. Like I said, she wrote in Sharpie on the fridge.
No, okay.
And so, obviously we took that out of her security deposit and got us a new fridge. So like I said, there's like I said, you got to be prepared for that. My tenant that I had to basically give him the notice to evict him. He left a bunch of stuff in the house, so I had to rent a dumpster. That was $500. I had to, pay two guys, to go, empty out the house, to pay those two guys to, do that, all that work. That was like another $500.
Wow,
Now,
question. You said it comes out of their deposit. Now, if I'm a new person and I don't really know too much, can you go a little bit more into detail on the deposits and how, because I think it's really critical for people to understand that everything that you just mentioned is documented, and then and that's how it's kind of deducted, right?
Right. I'll say that, you always make a note of everything, but keep in mind that when someone hightailed it out of a place, like when you gave them eviction notice, they leave in great shape, and they're not leaving around to collect the deposit, because like in the case of this guy, for example, by the time I, got him out of the house, he was already 2 weeks into the next month. So technically he, owed me so much money already. And then by the time I, empty out the house and, do a couple things, I've already kind of hit his,
what happens if someone does leave on good terms?
Yeah, so if they leave on good terms, they would wind up getting getting their deposit back in full, minus a predetermined floor cleaning fee or carpet cleaning fee.
Yeah, which non-refundable based off of what it.
Yeah, which would have been in the lease. So usually that's something like there might be like a $200 cleaning fee that would be non-refundable. And again, only if that's in the lease. I do have some properties where I don't have that in the lease, and they wouldn't have to pay anything. They would just get their money back.
Sure. And then as like a self-operating landlord, where are you creating these leases from and these legal agreements? And if I wanted to get into my first rental as a listener, how would I even get into the business? Because I'm sure, just as all the listeners are hearing elsewhere, it's a lot easier just to hire a property manager. And why wouldn't I just do that?
Well, it definitely is easier, and I mean, it's definitely a viable option. I mean, I don't encourage or discourage people being their own landlord. There's lots of benefits of hiring a property manager. I knew that I didn't mind doing the little bit of additional work to save that property management fee.
What are those typical fees where I feel like I'm,
Yeah, well, for me too, I also knew that because I had other things going on, I have kind of a slightly built-in workforce that makes it easy for me to kind of take some of these things on, because I have so many restaurants. I do have lots of employees, and oftentimes it is easy for me to say, hey, does anyone want to make an extra $20, $40, $50 to go do this real quick for something on one of my properties? So because I have, like I said, a large staff in most of the cities that I own property, I have advantages that the average person doesn't, and so that can, so in a lot of cases, you might just want to have a property manager because, that really is where you don't have any headaches. And, people talk about the fee, but that kind of goes back into when you're purchasing the real estate, underwriting those property management costs into your numbers to make sure it makes sense with a property manager. And that's why you can deal with no headaches. Myself, like I said, I knew that I was building things up enough where like I didn't mind it at first. Now, depending which direction I go in real estate over these next couple of years, I might eventually put all my properties with a property manager. It's just where I'm at right now. I'm still kind of possibly thinking about expanding that business myself. But like I said, I'm completely open to it because there's a lot of advantages. Now, where you should go get your contracts for leasing a home is always, for residential real estate, there's a lot of protections when it comes to for the tenant. You don't find that in commercial leases. That's why all those contracts have to be completely, made up between the landlord and tenant, because, whatever is agreed upon is agreed upon. But in residential leasing, there's laws that landlords, can't break, that protect the tenant, and, and vice versa. So that's why I always recommend getting your lease for residential lease straight from one of the state websites. So I usually just get a certified Florida residential lease. Everything's already in it. You just check a couple boxes. There's a few memo lines if you need to add in, a couple little things specific to your property. But for the most part, that'll keep you safe to make sure you're not violating any tenants' rights with anything. And make sure you're following everything to the guidelines. For example, in those leases, to make sure that landlords aren't just going in to a tenant's property anytime. There's notices on, how you have to give 24 notice before you would, come in to inspect the property and stuff like that. And as well as, in there, you could even outline further restrictions on that. But for the most part, like I said, just the state law is, you have to give a 24-hour notice. And that's the state of Florida. Other states might vary.
Man, no, that's all really, really good information, especially for someone that might not be, have as many properties as you, and also for making that decision on property managed, self-managed. That's a pretty big decision, right? Because you're kind of locked in for the lease agreement that you put in. I guess you could get a property manager to take over a pre-existing lease, but half of the reason you want to pay them is so they fill the vacancy, right?
Right. Well, and I mean, sometimes, because, property management companies do charge extra to fill a vacancy versus just managing.
Taking over and managing.
Yeah. So there's usually a property manager. A very typical fee is the first month's rent or half of the first month's rent for finding a new tenant.
Sure.
So there'd be that fee, every deal. Some have where they'll charge a fee on renewal. Some don't. That's just where it varies. But yeah, I mean, that's what a lot of people, though, especially brand new to real estate, would do. Like, and if I was looking at properties in a market that I wasn't. I would never buy in a market I wasn't somewhat familiar with, but just I didn't have like boots on the ground there per se. I didn't have anybody that like I knew that lived there. I just really liked it. For example, like there's a lot of places in Arizona I think are beautiful. I don't really know anybody that lives there full time super well enough that would help me. So if I bought over there, I would have to find a property manager who I could, definitely tell knew what they were doing and would know how to fill the unit, have confidence in filling the unit. That'd be most of the reason why I'm hiring them is to keep my unit, filled, so I don't have to totally learn that market and try to do it myself.
No, that makes perfect sense. So you've been in a lot of areas of real estate, and maybe for some of the listeners that haven't gone back to some of the early episodes, what kind of maybe led you into long-term rentals and then self-managing them and, now having quite enough, more than a dozen?
Yeah. So the thing I love about long-term rentals is it's easy for you to control the deal. There's a few things. One, they're very easy to get into. For someone who's new into real estate, it's one of the easiest ones to get into. How I got into most of mine was I'd bought a house, live in it a year, and then I'd move out and turn it into a rental. And to me, that's one of the easiest ways to understand real estate, because if I move into a home and let's just say that, my mortgage, taxes, and insurance all rolled up in that, monthly bill I get for my conventional home mortgage is around $2,500 a month. Well, all I have to do is basically watch my neighborhood. And once I see the houses are renting for 26, 27, 28, well, now I can start thinking about moving out, because then I can see how, that tenant will just completely cover my rent. And so then in my mind, my next step would be, I got to start, putting together my next down payment for the next house. So, so like I said, it's a very easy way to like do that, because I think one of the very, I don't remember the name of the book, but a book I read, but the premise of a book I read very early on in my, before I even got into real estate that got me interested in real estate. I think it was something called The Millionaire Next Door, but I don't quote me on that. But the book talked about buying a home every year for 15 years on 15-year notes. And then that way in 16 years, your first home would be paid off. Mm-hmm. And every year for the rest of your life, you could refinance a home on a 15-year note.
Sure.
And basically have a never-ending stream of money. So like once you hit that, yeah, no, and it was very inspiring because, like I said, it was a kind of started. It's what it started making me think that real estate was a doable plan. That like, because you see, a lot of times on across YouTube and Instagram, you see all these people dropping these large door numbers like, oh, I'm into 5,000 doors, I'm into 10,000 doors, and it's intimidating because because you're like, how do you do that? But so it's like very hard for someone who's sitting at zero to see how they're going to go to thousands of doors. But it's not that hard to start to think like, okay, maybe if I do a little work, make some planning and make some sacrifices, I can save up a down payment a year and keep stacking that. And like I said, so that was the first thing that kind of inspired me on it. And then I just kind of kept looking at it that the other thing I liked about single family homes is that, you as an individual can control that whole deal. Unlike a syndication where whether you're going in as a GP where you'll have some stay, but you got to talk to partners, or you're going as a LP, a limited partner in the deal where you have no say, you're just along for the ride and hope you invested in some great GPs. You don't control those deals, and you can make lots of money in those deals. A lot of those deals are great, but a lot of times the returns can be somewhat similar to a single family home that's in a really great market, because and that's something else people got to consider is because the markets I'm in Florida, the appreciation is really great, so there's I got that added onto it, and it doesn't take that long for the cash flow and the rent to make sense. And so when I have all those things working in my favor, it makes it a perfect investment because most of my properties here in Florida, I can go and refinance them every 5 to 7 years and walk away with a 6-figure check, and so it's so when you start having that mentality of man, if I stack up 7-10 of these, and just get to a point that every year I can come up with another one for refinance, you quickly see how you can have 6 figures a year pulling out of properties and have it for life. And all this is tax-free money, by the way. As we've talked about on previous episodes, because when you're financing property, it's a non-taxable event. So that's kind of the way I look at it for life. But then it's just real nice too when you have that security of the monthly payment. I manage my mom's rentals. And like I said, she's super blessed, but she has me as the property manager. So, so I have for her, they have as far as their long-term rentals, they have three single-family homes and then a 6-unit apartment. Between all of that, they get over 6 figures a year in rental income because most of their rentals are all paid for. So all theirs is 6 figure. They earn theirs completely passively. They don't have to do anything because I lease all the units out and manage them. And I don't do it for free. I charge them a small fee, nominal fee. It's less than any other property management company would. But I do. It does take time, and some of them are Class C apartments. So I mean, the management can be a lot. It's a very fair fee. But everybody's happy. but
I think you bring up a couple good things, and I want to pick your brain on some things. So you're mentioning that this kind of brings consistent cash flow, right? Mm-hmm. But then also appreciation.
Right. So great, let me pause there. Appreciation in great markets. So, again, I'm in Florida. I get great appreciation. If I was holding over in Mississippi, I'd be buying straight for the cash flow because that doesn't see a lot. No offense to people from Mississippi. You guys got some great real estate. It just doesn't appreciate as much as over here. So.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind one of those beachfront houses over there.
You're right.
Go to the beach, go to Biloxi or to the casino.
Mm-hmm. No, there's definitely some good markets in Mississippi. Yeah, but there's also a lot of rural area though as a whole that doesn't appreciate. But like over here where we're talking about Florida, we got super great appreciation.
Yeah. So how do you kind of manage that cash flow? And then also directly to that story, what do you think the difference between those multifamily, the apartment, as opposed to the single family rentals, and how do they kind of work since you're hands in, actively working and managing these two different types of asset classes, and which one has a better or worse or a unique advantage in comparison to the other?
Yeah, so it's different. Okay. Now that is one of the great things about an apartment complex is because, especially if you buy a big one, Class A, because that way you're buying it with management. So that can be truly a passive investment because you can completely set it with management. underwrite that in the deal. So I don't want to take anything away from that and say like that mine's better than that, because that's pretty great. But the thing is,
Okay.
that apartment complex, you know, in a good area is 15, 20, 25, 30, 40, 60 million dollars. I mean, down in Miami, they have, you know, complexes going for over $100 million.
Sure.
So like that's not a individual sport. You know, that's a team effort to take one of those, take one of those down. And so that kind of goes back to what I was saying, is that, you know, you got to create a team. If you want to get in that line of real estate, you got to be in a team and you're working with others, and then, you know, you got to agree with others. And like I said, you know, all that kind of just works in. That's the beauty of the single family home game, is that if you don't want to agree with others, you don't have to. You just, you know, you're buying the one house and you can completely control the one house. When you're ready to sell the house, you don't have to have a meeting about it. You don't have to confer with other people. It's just you're selling the house. Versus, so how do you know, and don't get me wrong, I love all types of real estate. You know, you and I own a bunch together, and you and I are completely good with like having the conversation if we want to buy. I mean, we have one lot, we both know the one we're talking about, where sometimes you'll be like, oh, let's go ahead and sell it, flip the money, and I'm like, dude, I don't want to sell it for less than this. I'd rather, find, but, we talk it out, and we have a great relationship because we both have the same long-term goal of, building our wealth together. So really, it's not a right or a wrong. We're just both throwing out options and
different options. No, I think that's a great way to put it. So each have their own kind of unique advantages. It's just kind of how you want to scale. Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah, no, that's a good way to do it. Now, one of the reasons, though, I also got into single family is because I saw it as a rapid way for me to save to get into bigger real estate. Because, if I have $50,000, and I just put it in the bank, it's not doing much. But if I go put $50,000 down on a $500,000 home in Florida, and it cash flows okay, and then in 10 years that $500,000 home's worth $1 million. Well, even if I don't have any pay down in the house, which we all know, there would be pay down, I would have at least another additional $500,000 in equity. So and probably when you look at pay down, it'd probably be like 650,000 in equity. That's now I can get into 5 syndications in a big way. I can sponsor a deal myself and then put a lot of money into the deal and really control it. I have more options, and so I looked at that as a way to grow my money there. And like I said, me have control of it. Could I have put that 50,000 in syndication and built it there? Definitely. But you also have to, trust and know the people you're putting that money in. And for me, at the point I was at, I've had in my previous life experiences too, by the way, I've had times in my life where I've lost money because I've trusted too much in what someone else was doing. Sure. And I knew that I wanted to ensure I got a certain nest egg and I needed to be in my control. And if I was going to lose it, I needed to lose it because of my fault, not because I put in the wrong syndication and they didn't run their numbers right and it went bust.
So is that kind of where you're at, thinking that single family makes it slightly more attractive for long-term holds because you can manage it independently?
That's what I love about it. It's like, because like right now, I know that if I have a tough time, I currently have 5 properties I own by myself with no one else on them. I know if I have a hard time, I can pretty much go to any one of those properties, do a refinance, and pull $100K or more. That's a good feeling. I guess it's like it's that's security, for me. And then don't get me wrong, I love what I'm doing with you, because you and me got a tremendous goal where we're trying to, just grow. Mm-hmm. So I don't need the money back out of that. We can just keep letting that fly, knowing that I have all my stuff over here that if I need money, I can get it. But we can keep investing what we're doing together. And that's what I do, kind of changing the subject slightly, but that's what I think one of the reasons why you and I operate well together, and what I'd recommend anybody who's operating with someone is make sure, that when you're in a partnership, it can be fluid, that, you're not completely set one way or the other, that you have some, that you guys need to have a talk, that you agree on a direction you're going, but then at the same time, have some flexibility as far as we were sharing an inside conversation with the viewers here, but you and I had a conversation a while back that I was really gung-ho on building to rent because I'm a hold. I hate selling.
Yeah.
Well, that's me coming from my renter, my landlord, being a rental owner background. Sure. Versus, you made your bones in real estate building, so you're build, sell, because, that's the way of the building life. And so, and then we basically had a talk one day about, well, if we sell to a certain point and get our basically our bankroll up to a certain amount that, you and I discussed in the 7-figure amount, then we have the ability to build to hold nonstop. And so it's like we both are getting what we wanted out of the deal. We just have a more strategic plan using both of our, backgrounds and thought processes to come up with that.
Yeah, and for the listeners, that took a long time. It came through meeting with banks. It came through meeting with other investors, and there's things like that. So,
and I'll add too, Will and I were both very open-minded with each other's thought process on it, because there was a long time Will was kind of riding on my side, then he kind of brought up his thought, and then I was like, well, dude, I'm completely open to that, and that's where I go into that. You make sure you're fluid in a certain way, and that's where if you do have other investments on your own that you can do whatever you want with, I think then that makes you able to be a better partner in the ones that you're with, because if you got a selfish idea that your other partner doesn't want to do, we just do it with one of your own.
So I think that is something that I want to bring up in the next episode, because if you guys don't know, both Sam and I have full-time jobs. So that us both working these full-time jobs as operators within the businesses independently from our shared business allows us to, utilize multiple investment vehicles. And that's something I think you should also play into, and should have a strategic plan in picking your partner as well. But we can definitely go into that into the next episode, because I'm really excited not only to talk a little bit more about partnerships. Sam and I, we're jumping in a whole bunch of things, from new construction, buying lots, holding lots, doing our daily businesses here and there, and all the operations that happen there. But we also are running this podcast, trying to meet, trying to network, doing all kinds of fun things. So, and if you guys have been listening lately, we're now, brokering virtual assistants. On top of that, we're helping really, really great investors who are good on the acquisition side, but maybe have either a really large backload of assignable properties that maybe they can't get sold. So we have another business venture for dispositions, and we're just doing a whole bunch of fun things. But the coolest part is we're just growing together. And I think when you do that and find a good business partner where they're also hungry and they want to do things, but they can also independently run their own business and are making money, not reliant 100% on this one thing, you have room to really kind of expand. And that's really fun.
Yeah. No, and it, like I said, it makes you nimble, so you're not fully reliant. Now,
totally.
We could argue the other side of having no plan B makes a hard push on plan A.
I completely agree.
But I definitely like it. But no, man, this has been great. So yeah, let's catch up next episode. But just kind of remind listeners that if you need a virtual assistant, we definitely recommend you using one from one of ours. I use one right now. They're doing great. I have them helping me out with some social media in my restaurants currently. Every evening, I'm getting a daily report with how many reach outs they did, what our followers increased by, along with a couple other metrics and KPIs that I'm having them bring to my attention. But definitely check them out. Go to virtualcallers.net and then use the code Elite Real Estate. So virtualcallers.net, Elite Real Estate, and definitely check out one of these virtual assistants, because they will definitely are great for real estate. They're trained, well trained in English, very clear and easy to understand, and very trained as cold callers. So they can cold call for you nonstop. But again, they also are very resourceful in doing other tasks for you. So please check out our virtual assistants at virtualassistants.net, code Elite Real Estate.
And we'll link that at the bottom. Check out the Elite Real Estate podcast as well. If you just go to our main website as well, you can click directly and then you just type in that code. Just use that code to save. It's going to save you a good percentage. So really excited on that. Big thanks to Clean Eats. Yeah, big thanks to Clean Eats, always letting us hop on and ride these podcasts. We're just always getting great guests and sharing good information. So anyway, we'll catch you in the next episode.
Sounds good. See y'all then.